Resilience, justice, and hope intertwines. Now more than ever, philanthropy stands as a beacon of transformative change, addressing urgent climate challenges and igniting strong partnerships to drive the Sustainable Development Goals. Philanthropy is a catalyst for progress. Let us embrace the power of philanthropy to create a future where every individual thrives and every dream takes flight. Stand with us to transform philanthropy and build a strong foundation for a sustainable and equitable future.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Planet Ocean campaign launch. The ocean is our greatest ally against climate change. It is a natural climate regulator, a huge carbon sink, a massive oxygen provider, a life sustainer, and yet we do not treat it with the great care that it deserves. Human activity has carried us to the brink of ocean collapse, and yet we still seek to find new ways to exploit and extract. I am Khadija Stewart, an ocean advocate and founder of EcoVibes Environmental Creators, and today I will be your moderator for the duration of our quick dive into Planet Ocean. This evening, we will be exploring ocean literacy, the importance of ocean health to the entire planet, and how human activity is affecting it. Get ready to listen, learn, and discuss as we plunge further into the depths of the mysterious fluid body that covers over 70% of our planet, surfacing 360 million square kilometers. This is Planet Ocean. I hope you guys are excited because I am very excited. And as you can see, my background is blue, it's giving ocean energy. So we will start with an overview of ocean literacy by Dr. Lorna Innes, head of the IOC UNESCO Regional Secretariat, IO Caribe, followed by presentations on ocean health and marine conservation by Rayanne McKenzie, the executive director of the Inaugural Area Environmental Protection Trust, and Ocean Threats by one of my dear friends, Robin Young, who is the scientific officer for the Center for Marine Sciences of the University of the West Indies and the projects and administrative coordinator at EcoSeas Caribbean. Lastly, we will open the floor to any questions from the audience. So please feel free to use what is that? What is that letter? And I am currently in London and it's one after 1 a.m. So if I can't pronounce words, please forgive me. But Q&A feature to drop your queries as the discussion continues. So for anyone who doesn't already know, ocean literacy refers to an understanding of the fundamental concepts and how the ocean functions, its influence on us as humans, and our influence on the ocean. Our full segment covers this topic brought to you by Dr. Lorna. So let me tell you all about Dr. Lorna. Um, the marine science and governance career of Dr. Lorna Veronica Ennis, full government name, spans more than 30 years and covers academia, national, regional, and global ocean governance. At present, she's a regional coordinator at UNESCO's Secretariat of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. A lot of big words for after 1 a.m. for the tropical Americas and Caribbean. Previously, she was the coordinator of the Cartagena Convention and acting director of the Coastal Zone Management Unit in Barbados. She was one of two coordinators of the group of experts to deliver the first World Ocean Assessment. Help me welcome our first speaker, Dr. Lorna Innes. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all. It's truly a pleasure to be here, and I guess you will be sharing my presentation shortly. But in the meantime, I did come across a very interesting slogan expression on your website, which I took note of. Next slide, please. And it says, "We are the generation that must live climate change." And I found that interesting because, okay, I'm not considered young anymore, but for 90% of my life, I have been experiencing climate change. So I would say that we have been the generation already that has been experiencing and living climate change. With that in mind, I wanted to just point your attention quickly before we get into ocean. In a sense, this is part of ocean literacy. Next slide, please. In about more than 20 years ago in Barbados, we had some anomalously high waves. There was no hurricane, no tropical system, no nothing. The water level on the south coast of Barbados was just higher. It was like 5 centimeters higher than normal. And next slide, please. As a result, one of our keystone beaches on the southeast coast, which was usually beautiful and wide, within 2 days became something very different. Next slide. This was the beach 2 days later. You can see the same rock there on the left-hand side. And of course, at that time, we already knew because we had been building our capacity and learning everything we could, both about climate change as well as the ocean in general. And as a result, we were able to begin addressing the situation, both with hard and with soft solutions. So I would say that we have, and of course we have to begin addressing issues, changes in rainfall patterns. We saw changes in the shape of beaches, not just the width, but the shape of beaches, which also makes a difference when you're talking about coastal development and properties that may be close to the coastline. I am clicking on the screen, but it's not advancing. So maybe you can continue click. Just to introduce you to the constituency of Rio Caribe, we service 29 member states. All of the countries and islands and territories and overseas departments that border the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico, from the US in the north, which is one of our countries, to Brazil in the south. So we cover quite a significant population center when it comes to ocean literacy. And we are now trying to decide, well, how do we do this? Of course, one of the ways to expand ocean literacy in the region would be to build partnerships. And of course, I had the privilege of meeting Khadija recently, virtually, and I'm looking forward to partnering with her and with your group to help us advance the ocean literacy initiatives across the region. Next slide, please. So what is ocean literacy? The first issue of ocean literacy, I believe that Khadija mentioned it already. We tend to focus very much on the benefits of the ocean to us. But really, the first benefit of the ocean to us is our survival. And a lot of people miss that, unfortunately. We tend to think of fish and seafood and recreation and shipping, but how we're able to purchase things because they come by ship. All of these different possibilities are wonderful. However, if I ask you to breathe once and then breathe again, that second breath comes from the ocean. As a result, we cannot exist on this planet without the ocean, because the ocean provides 50% of all of the oxygen that we breathe. So we'll go through the 7 essential principles of ocean literacy. But just to give you a little bit of background, in the early 2000s, the ocean literacy was born in the United States. There were a number of teachers who realized that they didn't have enough ocean-related topics in the educational system. And I believe that looking at our system, we're in exactly the same situation in the Caribbean. And so this is why we have launched the Ocean Literacy in the Caribbean program. I work for IOC UNESCO, and in 2017, IOC UNESCO picked up the ocean literacy framework and developed the principles as well as some guidance documents for us to work with. Next slide, please. So there are the seven ocean literacy principles. I think this is where I would spend most of my time this evening, because I think it's very important for you to understand these features. The Earth has one big ocean with many features. And I would just mention that we tend to think about, we have learned in geography and in other courses in school that there are 5 or 7, however you look at it, oceans. There's the Atlantic, there's the Pacific, there's the Indian, and then you tend to talk about the poles and the seas in between, but really it is one ocean. So we no longer talk about ocean being plural. It's one ocean, because everything that occurs there affects everything else. And we have features. So the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico is a feature of the ocean as being a single ocean. And the second principle is that the ocean and life in the ocean shape the features of Earth. Now, we were just talking about the beaches and the cliffs, the sand dunes. All of these are shaped by the ocean, if you think about it. Waves come in, and it is waves and currents and tides that determine the shape of our beaches. That's why when we want to address beach erosion, for example, we need to make sure that we understand those oceanographic features and parameters. We measure the waves coming in on a beach that we are going to be nourishing or that we're going to be protecting with a breakwater or a groin. We have to have long-term data on waves and currents and tides to be able to do that properly. So it's not just a case of putting rocks in the ocean. It doesn't work that way. And so the features, we have mountains in the ocean, we have seamounts, as they're called, and other features that really make the ocean a very interesting place to live, to work. I've spent a lot of my life underwater. I've had a privilege of doing that, and it's been an enjoyable journey. The third principle is that the ocean is a major influence on our climate and weather. I would go a little further. Of course, this is debated, but the truth is that the ocean regulates climate. So we tend to think, when we think of climate and the weather, we think of atmosphere. But really, it is the ocean, and whether the ocean is warm and whether the ocean is cool, you get a different climate. So what is going on with climate change, in my view, is really the result of the ocean being sick. We have damaged the ocean so much that it is no longer able to regulate our climate and weather the way it usually does. So that is why there is so much global attention now on the ocean, because if we are able to clean up the ocean, pollutants, if we are able to make sure that the balance of biodiversity comes back, then the ocean will begin again to work the way that it's supposed to for the benefit of humankind and other organisms. So now we move to the fourth principle, which is the ocean made the earth habitable. And I've spoken about this already. The fact that every second breath you take comes from the ocean. Without the ocean, we would not have enough oxygen to live on the earth. But because we are earthbound animals, we have a tendency to not to think about the ocean as being separate from us, and it is not. And then principle 5, the ocean supports a great diversity of life and ecosystems. And maybe this is the best known principle of all of them, because we eat fish, we eat different kinds of fish, but we also know about all the critters and the cute ones that are in movies, the dolphins, the sexy species, the ones that are ugly. So we know that there's a lot out there, and they're not all animals either. There are many, many plants. We have kelp forests, we have salt marshes, we have sandy shores. Even the sand that you would lie down on the beach on has several organisms that it supports. So that in itself is an ecosystem. And that's why we do so much work on biodiversity, really. For principle 6, the ocean and humans are inextricably connected. And I hope that I have already made that clear, that without the ocean, we would not be here. So therefore, but along with that, we're also depending on the ocean for food security, particularly in the islands. And we're also now depending on the ocean for many of our medicines. So we are really linking our survival to the ocean more and more. And then finally, the ocean is largely unexplored. We know a little bit about the ocean. So we still have a very long way to go. And as new research comes to hand, ocean literacy will continue to change to connect with that. Next slide, please. So at the national level, what we're proposing to do now as we launch the Ocean Literacy in the Caribbean project with our partners is for each country and island to identify your national priorities. If you're in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, it is possible that you will want to work with the oil and gas sector to make sure that they understand their impact on the ocean. They very much understand the benefits of the ocean to them, but do they fully understand their impact on the ocean? I'm not sure that they do. Whereas in Barbados, which is more tourism-based, then we may want to work on ocean literacy with the hotel developers, for example, so that from the time they are ready to locate their hotel, they're thinking about biodiversity. They're thinking about turtles. They're thinking about not blocking the movement of sand on the beach, etc. So each country will have to identify their national priorities for ocean literacy. And IOC UNESCO will be helping us to do that. Next slide, please. So this is the toolkit that has been developed by IOC UNESCO. It is fully available online. You can just type in Ocean Literacy for All, a toolkit, and it should come up within the first 10 hits that you get. It's completely free and open, and you can begin to learn a little bit about how to develop ocean literacy in your part of the Caribbean. Next slide. Now, another piece of our ocean literacy work is going to be with schools. And we have been establishing a global network of blue schools, but then we realized that there were very few of our 29 member states in the tropical Americas and Caribbean region with even one blue school. And so it is my goal that over the next 5 years, before I retire, that each of the Caribbean islands and our Latin American countries have at least one blue school in country. That requires the designation of blue schools coordinators for each country. Then we will train those coordinators, so because they're going to be the ones who, according to a set of criteria, will determine whether a school is ready to be designated as a blue school. And a next slide, please. This is very much linked as well to the establishment of a blue curriculum through our Ocean Decade project. So the blue curriculum, we have already started some discussions with the Caribbean Examinations Council that covers the English-speaking Caribbean, but the other countries do not have the same level of they do not have a partnership when it comes to education. So it will take us a little bit longer to go through the other countries. But we are already looking for entry points into the curriculum with CXC to make our primary and high school curricula much more blue than it is at this point. Next slide, please. I think I'm just about done, and I think my time is probably done as well. So obviously, there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to ocean literacy, but this is just a quick snapshot. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to hearing from any of you. I've put my email there. Please get in touch if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ennis. And first of all, let me just say that today I finally learned how to pronounce EO Caribe. I've been saying IO Caribe for the longest while. So I was very glad when you said it to get the proper pronunciation for that. And your presentation was extremely informative and definitely sets the stage for the rest of our discussion. And I know the new term going around, big ocean states, which is exactly what we are in the region. And it's so important to see ocean literacy, getting into the curriculum and for us as people of the islands surrounded by the ocean to understand the importance of it and how we use it in our everyday lives. And ocean literacy, is key to making informed decisions about our ocean and our planet in general. And it is also so important in our advocacy work for climate change. So this is me telling everybody now to sound off in the comments and let us know if this is the first time you're hearing about ocean literacy, were these considerations ever on your radar before today? And let us just know what you're learning, what you're finding exciting, what is just piquing your interest, or anything in general, right? But again, thank you, Dr. Ennis, for that very insightful presentation on ocean literacy. And I cannot wait to be in contact with you sometime in the future to discuss
Absolutely.
how we can move forward with progressing ocean literacy amongst our young leaders in the region. And next, we'll hear from Rianne McKenzie on ocean health and marine conservation. So, originally from Trinidad and Tobago, yay, big up because I'm from there. Rianne is an accomplished natural resource manager and currently the executive director of the Negril Area Environmental Protection Trust, with a bachelor's in marine biology and a master's in natural resource management of marine and terrestrial ecosystems. She navigates the I did mention that it's early morning and my words are no longer coming out properly, but she navigates the delicate balance between land and sea, and with over 2,000 dives as a PADI certified rescue diver, Rianne's underwater explorations fuel her dedication to coral gardening and marine conservation. In her diverse projects, Rianne has played a key role in training fishermen in the techniques of coral gardening and sea moss cultivation, fostering sustainable practices in the local community. So, Rianne, the floor is all yours. Looking forward to learning. Take it away.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes, all good.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Khadija. All right, so we're going to talk about ocean health and why it matters to us and why our lives literally depend on healthy oceans. Next, first slide, please. Okay, so I usually like to think of the ocean as our life support system. We've just heard that over 50% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean, and I feel like it's very important for me to reiterate that because obviously a healthy ocean would produce more oxygen, and we need oxygen to survive. Oceans cover over 70% of the earth, of the Earth's surface. And so it supports a wide variety of life on Earth, including us as humans. It also plays a critical role for regulating climate, supporting marine life, providing food, livelihoods. And then there's also a huge economic value, and this is on a global scale, in terms of fisheries, tourism, shipping, and those are just to name a few. We use the ocean on a global scale for a number of different things. And I've added another fact, which is the ocean absorbs about 25% of human-made carbon dioxide emissions each year, in its thriving, healthy state. So just imagine with all the advancements and carbon dioxide that we're emitting as humans, we have to depend on the ocean to absorb some of that. All right, I'm not able to, thanks. Okay, so we may be thinking, what makes an ocean healthy? So there are a number of things to take into consideration, and while it may not be every single thing, we want to keep these characteristics in mind, because it will give us a clear picture of what we need to maintain in order to have a healthy ocean. So clean water, first and foremost, we don't want to see any oil spills, we don't want any pollutants or anything in the water. A high marine biodiversity, and that just means more species of different levels interacting with each other, carrying out different processes and that sort of thing. A balanced ocean chemistry. So some of us, we may have heard of things like ocean acidification. That's when the chemistry is out of balance. Sustainable fishing. So we definitely want to consume or to capture different species at a rate where they can replenish themselves naturally. We don't want to overexploit. Healthy habitats, and there are a wide variety of habitats, deep sea habitats, coral reefs, kelp forests that was mentioned before, seagrass, mangroves, almost anything that you can think of. And then another really important thing is stable temperatures, and that may vary based on which side of the world you're in. But a stable temperature for where you are and for the habitats or the ecosystems that are in that area. And one of the most important things that makes an ocean healthy that we tend to forget about sometimes is the ocean's ability to recover, because, some things that we cannot foresee, like natural disasters, hurricanes, and that may overturn some corals or, put things a little bit off balance sometimes. So the ocean's ability to recover from that is also really, really very, very important. All right, so ocean health and our diet, and I put this first because diet is very important to me. I love seafood. So sustainable fisheries depend on healthy marine ecosystems. So a healthy marine ecosystem can support a wide variety of fishes and support them in terms of shelter, habitat, food, that sort of stuff. Overfishing and overfishing and ocean pollution lead to decline in fish stocks, which is something that we don't want. So think about, on a global scale, more than 3 billion persons depend on seafood as a major protein source. And not only that, but it's also crucial for our heart health. It's a major source of fatty acids and omega-3s, which is very, very important to us as humans. So, eat your seafood at a sustainable rate, of course. Next slide, please. Okay, ocean health and or air. So we mentioned that more than 50% or about 50% of the air that we breathe comes from the ocean. And we have to thank these very tiny, tiny little marine plants called phytoplankton. And a fun fact is that they produce more oxygen than all the world's rainforests combined. So I put a little picture here for you guys to understand, even though they're very, very tiny, there are billions and billions and billions of phytoplankton in our oceans that are working very, very hard to produce oxygen that we breathe on a daily basis. So a decline in phytoplankton populations due to ocean acidification can reduce the amount of oxygen that is available to all humans. So they're very, very important, even though they're very, very tiny. Ocean health and climate regulation. So oceans absorb excess heat and carbon dioxide, and that reduces the rapid changes in climate. Rising ocean temperatures lead to stronger natural disasters. So if you follow the news, we're seeing a lot more hurricanes, and when they do come, they're very, very scary and category 5 and high wind speeds and all these things, and those things are linked back to rising ocean temperatures. And then also the melting polar ice due to warming oceans result in rising sea levels, which then threatens coastal communities and also has a negative impact on marine ecosystems as well. Next slide. All right, so what are some of the consequences of having unhealthy oceans? So these are just examples that that are occurring right now as we speak. And feel free to do some extra reading on your own, but I feel like we may have all heard about coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, which was one of the, if not the most, I should say, resilient or diverse coral reef ecosystem. And, because of a lot of different factors now, there's coral bleaching and coral death, and it's a great concern on a global level, so that's a consequence. Also, overfishing in West Africa, there's this big fight, I would say, of commercial fishing in West Africa happening at a very unsustainable rate and negatively impacting the coastal communities and the livelihoods of people that depend on fishing. Dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. If I remember correctly, that's a result of pollutants. So you have areas that are completely dead. The reefs are dead. You don't see any sort of life, that sort of stuff. And then the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a very, very huge, I don't remember the exact size, but very, very big, thick circle of trash that's circulating in the middle of the ocean, stifling whales and turtles and all that sort of stuff. All right, so how is Jamaica affected? So in case you didn't know, Jamaica is considered a small island developing state. And that has a whole lot of characteristics that go with it. But for the purpose of this presentation, it's important that we know that SIDS rely very heavily on the ocean for food, livelihood, and tourism, which is, the main sectors in Jamaica. So the economic stability of Jamaicans is directly linked to ocean health. Declining ocean health threatens jobs, livelihoods, and food security in Jamaica. And the rising sea levels and stronger hurricanes can impact infrastructure, which we've seen just earlier this year. And that wasn't even a hurricane, that was just a cold front. And a lot of places on the North Coast were impacted in Montego Bay, I think Ocho Rios as well. I'm not too sure about the South Coast, but definitely the North Coast saw some impact. Next. Okay. Why protecting the ocean matters. So what role does marine conservation play in keeping oceans healthy? Marine conservation, so it protects marine life, rehabilitates vital habitats. So your coral reefs, your seagrass, your mangroves that basically line Jamaica's coastline. Reduces overfishing from the point of view that conservation looks to balance between what we need in order to survive and thrive, and then also what won't be detrimental to the environment. Combats pollution, helps to fight climate change, and of course encourages persons to act locally. Next. Okay, so I work with the Negril Area Environmental Protection Trust, which is on the western side of Jamaica. And basically what we pride ourselves on is making local efforts for a global issue. So we focus on protected area management for the Negril Marine Park. There are different zones where different things are allowed within the marine park. So you have areas where there's no fishing. We have areas where we recommend reduced boat activity, no anchoring, and a number of different things to keep the ecosystems within the marine park as pristine as possible. We do a lot of community engagement and education, and that's very, very important because, you know, we're one entity, and a lot of the times persons within the marine park use the resources way more than us. So community engagement on how to sustainably use these resources is very, very important. We do restoration projects in terms of mangrove rehabilitation and coral gardening or coral restoration. And okay, I'll get to your question in a second, Emma. And then, so here at NEPT, we try to take a ridge to reef approach. And what that basically means is that, well, we understand that a lot of things that we do on land affects what happens in the marine park. So we try to work with farmers and promote climate smart agriculture and also community engagement on land as well. And that in turn, hopefully reduces some of the impact that happens on land that goes straight into the marine park. Okay, so the unknowns of the ocean. So 80% of the ocean is still unexplored and unstudied. And that, I mean, just think about it. 80% is huge, huge, huge. There's so much that we don't know, so much that we haven't seen, and a lot of processes that may happen in the ocean that may be affecting us directly that we're not sure about. There are many marine species that remain undiscovered, and some just as similarly to how there's you know, plants on land that have medicinal qualities, you know, there may be things under the ocean that we just don't know about that, you know, have the same sort of medical or environmental importance. And our limited understanding of deep sea ecosystems could mean unknown risks to human health and safety. All right, so in light of this campaign, of course, we're going to have a call to action, and we, you know, it's very important for us to know what is our role, individual role in protecting ocean health. And some of these things seem very, very simple. And people always say to me, well, you know, what is one person going to do that's going to make the change? And I always try to encourage persons to not look at yourself as one little speck of dust in the larger scheme of things, but to think of it as everybody has their own part to play. And if everybody has that same mindset and we multiply that by millions of people, you know, we'll see the impact. So you're responsible for yourself. You be responsible for yourself. You do the responsible things. And then we try to multiply that by the millions or billions of people around the world. So it's very important, especially on a local level, to support sustainable seafood choices to preserve fish population. And for us in Jamaica, what that would look like is paying attention to how the fish is caught, the size of fish that you're purchasing, and paying attention to the close seasons that the government has in place. So there is a close season for lobster population, which is a very popular dish, seafood. So there's a close season, I believe that's April to June every single year. So if you see a fisherman or a restaurant selling you lobster during that time, please shame them. They shouldn't be doing it. It's against the law. There's also a conch close season, and usually if you guys are active on social media, the National Fisheries Authority, they post it every year when the close season is, so you guys can keep abreast with those things. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. I feel like everybody says that all the time, and you know, we don't really understand the impact that it can make, but on a local level right now, what that looks like would be, and you can also follow these entities on social media. But basically that would be, you know, plastic bottles, which Jamaica has a huge issue with plastic bottles. So to reduce, I think should be our first priority. And then reuse, and then of course recycle. This is also very important. I feel like persons don't understand how powerful advocacy is. So we need to advocate for policies that protect the oceans and marine life. You know, to even in small groups, to speak to your local MP, ask them questions, don't be shy, that sort of thing. And then of course, to remember that every individual action contributes to the health of the ocean and in turn, our personal well-being. Okay. And just to wrap up, a healthy ocean means a healthy life for all of us. And so that means that it's all of our responsibility to take action and to advocate. Thank you. Do I answer the questions now or after?
I feel like this is a short one that was kind of related to your question, so you could, to your presentation, sorry, so you could go ahead and answer it real quick.
Okay. How many marine protected areas are there in Jamaica, and how are they maintained and monitored? Yes, so it's very, very challenging. As far as I know, specific to fish sanctuaries, which is a type of marine protected area, there are currently 20 around the island, and I believe the government is looking to increase that by about 6 or so in the next couple of years. But currently we have 20, and they're maintained by non-government organizations with some support from the government. But usually or typically it would be an NGO in conjunction with community groups. So here at Negril, NEPT is a NGO, and we work with different community-based organizations to promote community-based conservation. So in terms of monitoring, usually it's up to the NGO to decide how they want to monitor it, whether annually, every 5 years, and different parameters or factors or things that they look at, like coral cover, fish counts, hectares, number of hectares of mangroves that have increased or decreased. You know, it's up to the NGO specifically. And it's very, very difficult. I can speak for Negril, there are lots of challenges that we encounter in terms of pollution, in terms of financial support, in if so it's a range of issues, but there are also lots of positives as well in terms of the people that depend on these marine resources are involved and engaged, and we're doing the work that we can, given all the external factors.
All right. Thank you very much, Rian, for your presentation. Very insightful. And I feel like now more than ever, we definitely understand the importance of a healthy ocean and what that means for us as humans. And just want to, of course, big you up for all your efforts in marine conservation. You, along with so many others, definitely unsung heroes of our times. And, you kind of touched on overfishing, you touched on rising temperatures, and I feel like we could all relate to rising temperatures right about now. I don't know if anybody has been to the beach or the ocean recently, but the waters are warm and not normal, just a little oomph warm, like warm, warm, to the point where recently I saw pictures of people in Trinidad at Maracas Beach with an umbrella open whilst in the water, right? So, and
Wow.
that's just from direct sunlight, but the temperature of the water itself is ridiculous. And we are experiencing coral bleaching and so many other things. But like you mentioned, there's so many things that we can do in our everyday lives to make sure that, we have a healthy ocean moving forward. Before we jump into our next speaker, I just want to ask a few questions. And remember that you could type your questions or queries in the chat. And for this, you feel free to unmute or you can just respond in the chat. But for those of you who don't directly live or work by the ocean, it can be difficult to see how ocean health affects us. So if anybody at all could give an example of how ocean health might affect the average Jamaican in their everyday life, feel free to drop the answer in the chat or unmute and just let all your knowledge flow and bless us all with the information. Anybody? Anybody? No takers? On our question? All right. Well, okay, Emma, see you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking of the impact of on our daily lives of, for example, I live in Kingston, and the impact of the health of the harbour. I mean, not necessarily the open sea, but the harbour, and how it affects people's health, especially those communities that live, and some of the fishing communities right on the edge of the harbour. Because when you go down to to the harbour, you see, and there's even, a strong smell. So there is a sense that it's not a sort of the contract. Okay, there's a road that runs between the harbour and the open sea. If you go and stand on the open seaside, you're sort of breathing in this wonderful air and much fresher air. And if you go on the harbour side, it's almost as if it's sort of stagnant, polluted water. You could the sort of pollution fills your lungs, or that's how I feel it anyway, especially in some parts of the harbour. So it's just a kind of sense that that it's affecting your general sort of like well-being. And it's because I suppose the harbour is so enclosed and it's so impacted by all kinds of human activity that it's like all concentrated there. Anyway, that's just my thought. It's just a feeling.
No, I'm sure it's more than a feeling because unhealthy or polluted ocean definitely would also affect air quality, right?
Mm.
So,
Yes,
yeah,
I was
yeah,
thinking that. Yeah, yeah, you can, yes, you can breathe it in.
yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts on how ocean health might affect the average Jamaican in their everyday life before we move on to the next question? Are we moving on? Are we moving on? I would answer, but the question specifically says average Jamaican. So I feel not qualified to give a response to this. I see Colin has his hand up. So Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how the amount of fish that we have, because you just mentioned it earlier, we are a people that eat a lot of fish. And as the reefs degrade and as the fish die and as there's more pollution and even more ocean heating, we end up with less availability of fish, and that can really impact not just our diets, but the livelihoods of coastal communities. That's all I had to say.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point because as Caribbean people, we are all heavily dependent on a thriving fisheries sector. And if it is our fish are polluted, then less fish available. And like you mentioned, livelihoods affected. And then we end up importing fish. And the price of fish goes up because we're now importing it. And so all these other ripple effects of things happen. But we move on to the next question, which is what is one concrete thing everyone in this session can do to protect the ocean in their everyday lives? And I feel like Rianne gave a lot of different things that we could do. So this is a true test of who was paying attention. So feel free to drop the answer in the chat, or you could go ahead and unmute and respond.
Okay, I would say one thing, and this may differ for different persons in the field as to what they would think would be the most important. Especially for persons who are not involved in, the intricacies of marine conservation. I would say that advocacy is a very important thing. I feel like we don't speak up enough about
Mm-hmm.
what we're experiencing, or even just to ask questions about things that we don't understand, or to keep ourselves abreast with the information. What I myself, I like to read up about what other countries, like where they are, especially other Caribbean countries or other SIDS, where they are in terms of their legislation to protect the ocean, what treaties or agreements they're what's the word? They're associated with or have ratified.
Mm-hmm.
And then to hold our government accountable. Some of these things are, and you don't need to know the fancy jargon and those things, but just advocacy and keeping yourself educated and asking questions and just care. Just care about it. Care enough to ask a question to the right people or
Yeah,
to the
I love
leaders, to
that.
the authority. I think that's the most important.
I love that. Just simply, I mean, you shared a lot of crucial points, but I feel like caring is a big one as well. And that's like
Yeah.
one of the easiest things that we can do as people working in this space, as overwhelmed by uh abundance of issues plaguing the world and our countries and everything right now. So yeah. All right. Well, we will move on. Thank you again so much, Rianne, for your presentation. Very insightful, very informative. And now we will move on to Robin Young as she talks us through ocean threats, the human and climate impacts on the ocean. So let me tell you all a little bit about Robin. Robin is a scientific officer at the UWI Center for Marine Sciences, having attained a BSc in marine biology and having loved the ocean all her life. Being a PADI advanced open water diver, she marvels at marine ecosystems. She sees protecting and conserving the marine environment as a personal responsibility and advocates for ocean protection through a role in EcoSeas Caribbean as the projects and administrative coordinator. So, Robin, excited to see your presentation. Take it away.
Oh, my ring light just died. Anyway, I hope you guys can see me. I hope everyone can hear me. Awesome. So thanks so much, Khadija, for that awesome introduction. And thanks to all our previous speakers and everyone joining online and on YouTube as well. Can't wait to get into it. So let's go. Okay, so I feel like I'm just going to be repeating what both our presenters had said earlier today. I mean, if many people say it, it must be true, right? So let's just hop right into it. So the ocean, of course, constitutes. Oh, was it finished? It's fine. The ocean constitutes more than 70% of Earth's surface. And of course, we are facing so many ocean threats today that seems to just be increasing day by day, year by year. And, it jeopardizes the ocean health and the biodiversity of the earth as well. As Rianne had mentioned earlier, too, we are small island developing states here in the Caribbean and across the world, or large ocean states, as we had discussed earlier, and we are so dependent on our blue economy, whether it's through food security or coastal economies, and of course, the regulation of Earth's climate. And as human activities intensify and our population increases, there are countless needs to address and mitigate the ocean threats that we face today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off, of course, with the big bad climate change. We know everyone here is familiar with climate change. Climate change causes the Earth's temperature to rise and affect various aspects of the environment, including the oceans. This impact is not only local here in the Caribbean or even in Jamaica, but it's global, and it affects marine ecosystems far and wide. And I just have a few little tidbits that I'm not going to spend too much time on. Rising ocean temperatures, of course, the warming of the sea. This can affect marine species. It can affect reproduction of said species. It can affect migration patterns because of the warming ocean. Some species can't withstand certain temperatures. It affects their daily lives down there underneath the sea. So rising ocean temperatures is not great at all, and it kind of feeds into coral bleaching. Corals, as we know, are living creatures, and they have a special relationship with tiny algal cells. And these cells, when they become stressed under this heat, the corals kind of expel them. And then, of course, coral bleaching is what we see as a result of that. There are some species that are able to withstand bleaching, and some of them can recover, but more often than not, they don't, and they die, or they are exposed to different types of diseases. So it's definitely not great for our coral reefs. Sea level rise, as Ryan had spoken about, and Dr. Lorna had spoken about as well. Sea level rise is absolutely just not a good thing because, we experience coastal erosion, beach erosion. It
All right, I think we may have lost Robin for a minute there. Hopefully she rejoins soon. We was now getting into the conversation, now getting into the effect of climate change in the ocean. Robin, where are you?
Am I
What's
back?
going
I
on?
have no idea what happened a while ago. It just completely kicked me off. I have no idea. So sorry, everyone.
You're back.
My
You're good. Go
I
ahead.
don't know. So sorry about that. So, right, sea level rise. I was speaking about agriculture can affect our crops and so on with seawater intrusion. So that's also something that is to be considered. Ocean acidification. When the oceans are warm, it has the greater ability to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and this causes the ocean or the seawater to become more acidic. And this is absolutely terrible for our molluscan friends, for our corals. It weakens their shells, and it 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 weakens their shells, it weakens the coral structure, and it's just overall really terrible for our friends with shells, and we love shells so much. Deoxygenation. Ariane touched on this a little bit as well. The warmer the ocean is, the less oxygen it can hold. So it creates dead zones in different parts of the ocean, depending on where you are. And, of course, dead zones devoid of life, nothing is there. It's almost kind of barren. Increased frequency and stronger extreme weather events. This is something we can absolutely relate to here in the Caribbean. We have had Hurricane Beryl just now. Hurricane Milton came and really did a number on Florida. Hurricane Helene came and did a real big number on Mexico. And so many storms and cyclones and typhoons have been happening just this summer alone. And that is definitely telling of a changing climate. And of course, changes in ocean circulation. So, as Dr. Lorna had mentioned earlier, oh, I'm finished. Awesome. Changes in ocean circulation. So, as Dr. Lorna had mentioned earlier, the ocean is really the one that regulates our climate, and depending on salt water, the different types of salinity or different levels of salinity, I should say, in the ocean, ocean circulation can definitely be affected, and this affects, nutrient distribution, species distribution. It's just one big umbrella that it's just not really great for our ocean. So it is a definite huge threat. Next slide, please. We can move on now to biodiversity loss. So climate change drives habitat loss and alters species' natural habitats, depending, as I had mentioned earlier, climate change can affect the migration patterns of some species, and of course, habitat loss, especially our coral reefs, our seagrass meadows, and our mangrove forests. If those are degraded due to climate change and other factors, species really have nowhere to go, and because of this, they die. I found this little tidbit again from the World Wildlife Fund. They had delved into something called the Living Planet Index, where they studied lots of species, over 5,000 species from 1970 to 2020. And it indicated that marine populations have declined by 56%. That's a lot. That's more than half of what we have on the earth. So I think it's really important for us to think about how much it threatens our oceans, how much it threatens our health, and how much biodiversity is important for a healthy, sustainable ocean. Next slide, please. And then we come to plastic pollution. This is something, again, everyone is quite familiar with. Plastic pollution is a really big, major threat to oceans, with millions of tons of plastics entering the marine environment each year. And of course, we know about microplastics as well, because plastics don't degrade, especially, well, definitely not in our lifetime. They can break down into smaller pieces, into microplastics, which can contaminate the food chain. And of course, it's really bad for our human health and the health of our marine species. This I really want to highlight today. The Ocean Conservancy, they did a ICC report, that's the International Coastal Cleanup Day report for last year. I got this information from the Jamaica Environment Trust. And I want you to know that Jamaica was reported the third largest quantity of plastic bottles collected in the world on International Coastal Cleanup Day. And that was just last year. We just had Coastal Cleanup Day just now at the end of September, so I'm sure the statistics will come out for 2024 real soon. But I just want you guys to know that that is a lot. Third in the world for such a small island. That's a lot to think about. I mean, come on. Lots and lots of plastic bottles were collected around our beaches. Although it is a good thing. It's a good thing that we are cleaning up our beaches. We're trying to keep our oceans healthy. But that is just to give you an idea of the vast amount of plastic, especially plastic bottles that are congested in on our coasts. So yeah, that's a lot to think about, guys. Next slide. I want to touch on us. I want to touch on unsustainable fishing practices, which Rian had touched on a little bit too. So I'll start off with overfishing. Overfishing, as we know, is the removal of a species of fish faster than that species can replenish itself naturally. And because of this, it becomes too depleted to recover, and we risk extinction or just complete eradication of a species in a particular area. Of course, this is really, really bad for the environment. It also contributes to biodiversity loss, as we had mentioned earlier. Overfishing, we don't want to overexploit and, damage our coastal and our marine ecosystems. I don't want to spend too much time, but illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is also a really big issue around the world where fishermen or fisherfolk from other countries come into other waters illegally and fish our stuff, especially when it's not reported or it's not regulated. This can lead to really bad overexploitation of our fish species. I want to touch on ALDF that's abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear, aka ghost fishing. I'm sure some of you have heard the term before. And it is considered one of the deadliest marine plastics because old fishing gear that has been just tossed into the ocean or old fish pots that have been forgotten, they unselectively catch wildlife. I'm sure everyone has probably seen on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram Reels or something, a seal wrapped up with plastic or a turtle in the ocean, just completely wrapped up in plastic. And without human intervention, you can imagine that that animal would have just died a really slow, painful death through exhaustion or suffocation, depending on what it is. So yeah, ghost fishing is a really, really big issue. I know for ICC Day in Discovery Bay, they had done an underwater cleanup and cleared up a lot of that abandoned fishing gear as well. So that's a good initiative by the country. But just to highlight that ghost fishing is a really, really big issue. Lastly, bottom trawling and bycatch. Bottom trawling, it can damage and remove animals living on the surface of the seabed because the trawl just kind of drags everything in its path. It's really unselective. So instead of like a hook and line, you're just trying to catch everything all at once, and that can damage the seabed itself, and of course plants and different sessile animals that live on the seabed too. Bottom trawling is not a good fishing practice. And as a result of that, and others, there is bycatch. So fishermen can catch species or animals that they don't want, they will die and so on, or they don't want to keep it as well. And they'll just toss it back, or, that species gets depleted almost by accident, I want to say, because, the fisherman has caught it already, more than likely it's dead. So bycatch is a really, really, really bad fishing practice. And just to highlight too, dynamite fishing and cyanide fishing, this is also an unselective fishing practice that, they use dynamite to just kill everything and they catch what they want and leave what they don't. So that is another unsustainable fishing practice. Next slide. And to kind of top it all off, there is the new emerging threat of deep seabed mining. For those of you who don't know, deep seabed mining is an emerging commercial extractive industry, which the goal is to remove mineral deposits from the floor of the sea. I say emerging, but it has really been tested and it's been going on for more than 10 years. And I can promise you, it is not sustainable at all. It is a really, really big threat to our ocean. It hasn't been green lighted just yet, but you can imagine the kind of damage that deep sea bed mining will have on our oceans, not just here in the Caribbean, but all over the world. Um, just to point out that the ocean is the largest carbon sink on Earth. It is one of our biggest allies against climate change. So trying to greenlight this new industry when the ocean is such a big friend is really not a good idea. There's not enough scientific data on the deep sea, as Ryan had mentioned earlier. 80% of our ocean is not explored, it is unstudied, it is untouched. So trying to um, go ahead with such an industry that can cause, irreversible harm without enough scientific data to back up to say that, okay, maybe you can go ahead with this. It's not a good idea, especially when we don't have the scientific evidence to back it up. And we are in the midst of a triple planetary crisis, as I had, presented earlier. Climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. That is the big three, as I like to call them. We are in the midst of trying to fix all those issues, so to speak. So to try to greenlight this industry that will only cause more damage, it's really not a good idea. Next slide. So here, I mean, it's kind of small to see, but here I just have some risks and impacts of mining the seafloor. Vibration and noise disturbance, especially, dolphins and whales, they communicate through echolocation. So having, loud drilling noises and so on, you can imagine, how lost they would be trying to find each other, or find food, or find their way home. Water temperature changes. I mean, it's already changing with climate change. There's no need to add warmer water into already warm. So you can, of course, have the time, take the time, read it through, and do some independent reading as well on deep sea bed mining. Do your research, and yeah, be aware of what's going on, what's on the horizon. Next slide, please. Right. So with all of that being said, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We don't want to lose hope. So we do have conservation and adaptation efforts. They are needed to protect our marine life and our marine ecosystems and mitigate the impacts of climate change, including marine ecosystem protection. I highlight that as well because, we have our marine protected areas, we have our fish sanctuaries. These are really, really good efforts into trying to, rebuild our populations, our fish populations, our fish stocks, so that, future generations have use for them. And it kind of ties into sustainable fisheries management as well. Global policy, of course. Jamaica had just signed the BBNJ treaty, that's the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty. So trying to get, or for our country to be involved in something so great, it must mean something. It hasn't been ratified as yet, but at least we are in a step in the right direction on the global playing field. Public education and awareness, exactly what we're doing right now. We are, sharing our knowledge. I like to tell people all the time, it is so easy to exist in our marine conservation bubble and not, disseminate the information as we should. But as, everyone before me had pointed out, it is very, very important for our youth to become involved, for, young adults to become involved. Everyone on earth should really be playing their part in trying to raise awareness against, protecting our marine environment, because of course it is so important. And of course, taking accountability, as Rayhan had really touched on this, you reduce, reuse, you recycle. You try to take that personal accountability as well. What can I do to kind of mitigate all the problems, all the ocean threats that are being faced? As we like to say in Jamaica, one cocoa full basket. We all have to play a part in protecting our marine environment. So thanks so much for listening. Here's a QR code. You can scan and get a copy of the presentation if it is you'd like to keep it. And my contact information is somewhere at the bottom there. And yeah, thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Robin. And oh my gosh, I sometimes when we talk about the threats and everything in the ocean, it's so hard to be like, yes, stay motivated and to be like, yes, we have a part to play, etc. Sometimes you just want to be like, the ocean is on the brink of exploding. Let's all just let it happen and move away. But we definitely can't be like that because even though that there's so much different problems, like you touched on, from climate change to overfishing to ghost gear, and the list goes on, there's still so many solutions coming out every single day, and we all have a part to play in that. So it's so important that we focus on the positives and while still acknowledging the fact that the negatives do exist, but there's opportunity to turn it around.
Absolutely, for
Yeah, and
sure.
you also touched on biodiversity and the fact that Jamaica signed the BBNJ conference. Lord, I said it's early morning. The BBNJ treaty and everything else. And I
Mm.
know right now there's the biodiversity cup happening, and one of the biggest slogans around that is that the planet is blue, which it really and truly is. And one ocean, we're all connected by it, and it's so important for us to, like you mentioned, and everybody else so far, work towards protecting and making sure we have a healthy, safe, and secure ocean. So with that, I would open up for questions. And I see we have one in the chat right now that says, have any studies been done on the extent and the impact of ghost fishing in the Caribbean? So I know that UNEP has the UNEP Cartagena Convention, the office, which is also headquartered in Jamaica. They've done a lot of studies on ghost fishing because it is a pollutant, and their office focuses a lot on marine pollution in the region. So they have a lot of papers out on and studies along with that. But I don't know if any of the other speakers would like to answer and give a more direct response.
I'll just go since it was in my presentation. Yes, there has been considerable work done on ghost care and the effects of ghost care. I know that through UNEP, as Khadija had said, there have been considerable efforts. I actually attended a webinar some time ago on the effects of ghost care, and many professionals, not just in the region but around the world, as I said, it's a global problem. It's not just here in our backyards, and so many people are trying to mitigate those effects. So yes, work has been done on ghost gear.
Yeah, and a lot of times when people mention pollution in the region, we tend to think the plastic that we see or things like organic waste from sewage, etc. But ghost gas is actually one of the biggest marine pollutants in existence right now, which is just something that is completely out of sight and out of mind because once the net is discarded, it just sinks to the bottom. So yeah. Do we have any other questions? Let me check and see. Yes. Is anyone aware of the Caribbean garbage patch? Um, oh, sorry, I can't read it. This is a me problem. Is anyone aware if the Caribbean garbage patch is under investigation? And for that, I don't know if anybody wants to jump in and respond, but I would say yes by international NGOs more than regional. And I could be wrong with that response, but I feel like everything I have seen around that has been work from like Four Ocean or I try to remember the name of the other international NGOs that have been doing work and studies with that and not so much Caribbean bodies. And this is the garbage patch by closest to Haiti you're referring to, right? If not, then my answer is completely wrong. But I think so. Um, do we have any other questions? Okay, you said no, it's not by Haiti. Okay, then I don't know what Caribbean garbage patch you're referring to. Mm, interesting. Near Honduras. Okay. So that's a hmm. Yeah, I just looked it up. I'm seeing pictures and everything now by Honduras and yeah, I am positive that the Honduras National Marine Conservation Body would be doing research on that. We could check in with some of we have partners in Honduras doing work there, working on Rotan and everywhere else. So maybe next session we could get some speakers from the um, Latin American countries with Caribbean coast to come and share on their realities and everything as well. Keep it a full regional informative session so that we up to date with marine problems happening everywhere within our region, not just English speaking Caribbean, but within the Latin American countries as well. All right, any other questions? Hmm, yeah. Please, all right. I hope the organizers take a note in the chat of some of the places where people want to get information from. Belize as well. Colin, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about regenerative aquaculture or regenerative like I know about regenerative agriculture on the land, things like afforestation, things like the way in which we manage the pasturing and so on, and how that can help to restore depleted areas. What does that look like underwater, aside from coral gardening and seaweed farming? Is there other things that are being used in the Caribbean in particular?
All right, so that question is completely outside of my bracket. So Robin or Rian, anybody want to take it?
Um, I'm not sure who asked. Could you repeat the first? I didn't hear the first half of the question. Sorry.
Yeah, it's me. I was asking about, I'm saying I've heard of regenerative agriculture, as in
Mm-hmm.
land-based farming, and how the way in which we farm can help to restore depleted lands. Things like cover cropping, things like managing how we pasture animals and so on, silvopasture, can help to restore those depleted ecosystems. I imagine that there are similar techniques that can take place underwater. I suppose that's what things like coral farming and seaweed farming are, ways of, I guess, growing things under the water to restore depleted landscapes. And I was just wondering, what does it look like, or what things do you all implement?
Um, well, not specifically, or I should say not to my knowledge, not specifically like working with the habitats or the ecosystems specifically, but you do have man-made structures, for example, like what you call those, like the seawalls and so on, that would help prevent or reduce the rate of shoreline erosion and that sort of stuff. But as far as I know, especially in Jamaica, practitioners tend to focus on coral gardening, whether in the water or on land, to try to regenerate. And I believe there's also some upcoming research in terms of um, I don't want to say making or creating more corals that are genetically predisposed to withstanding higher temperatures. Not sure how far they are in that aspect, but yeah, as far as I know. Does that answer your question, Colin?
It does, thank you.
Sure.
All right, do we have any other questions? Oh. All right, well, it is now, oh, I don't even know what time zone this is in. I think this is still in Trinidad time, 9:26, which is 8:26 Jamaican time. So we have about 4 minutes left of this session. So I feel like we could wrap up. We could wrap up now. But before we do that, I just want to say real quick the garbage patch of Honduras, because I went and looked it up when you asked the question, because I was very curious about it. And there are several organizations within Rotan, which is the island that is mostly affected, as well as international organizations. I see Blue Planet Society, as well as, like I mentioned, Four Ocean. They're also doing work there, and some others are working on trying to clean that area up and have a campaign. But most of the pollution that is forming that patch is actually coming from one of the rivers in Guatemala. And last year, fortunately, had the opportunity to do some work in Guatemala and understand that their environmental laws, especially when it comes to things like pollution, basically non-existent, and to speak up against it is a threat on your life. So there's so much more that is going into this issue of pollution, more than just, environmental problem, but also a human rights problem as well. But that is a conversation for our next day. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for the excellent questions that we had. We certainly had a very rich discussion, and we will leave this space with a lot to contemplate. And like Rian said, make sure we be curious, eager to learn more, eager to stay informed and go out and advocate. And our Planet Ocean campaign will continue to unfold over the next 10 months as we gear up to fight to protect the ocean from incoming and immediate threats. However, what we have hoped to have built here is a lifelong advocate for the ocean and the planet. And we're not going to leave hanging without some call to actions. Of course, we had several call to actions that were shared before, but just to reiterate once again, um, links will be shared in the chat as we speak. So yes, I've been seeing that happening. And sign on to international petitions against deep sea mining, an issue near and dear to my heart. I've been working on this for the past 2.5 years. Been on break, but we'll be back in January 2025 to start back pushing the fight for deep sea mining. We've had so many countries pushing and ratifying the BBNJ, and we can't have one without the other. So it's important to also keep pushing for that. And add your signature to a Caribbean Statement of Solidarity and the Stronger Caribbean Together manifesto. And I'm sure that will be shared in the chat. And don't forget to follow the conversation on all social media pages at Our Footprint Jamaica, at Cafril Alliance JA, and at, you know what? We drop all the hashtags in the chat. That will make life easier than me trying to say these things at 2:30 in the morning. So I would just like once again to thank everybody for attending the launch of our Planet Ocean campaign. It was my honor to be your host and moderator. I hope you forgive me for all the mistakes I made in speaking throughout the night, but that's okay. I was here. We learned about the ocean, we connected, and now we feel compelled to go out and be ocean advocates. Yes, yes, I hope so. That's the goal. That's the win. That's what we trying to do, make sure that we all work towards protecting our lovely blue planet. And like was mentioned in the past, we are no longer small island developing states. We are big ocean states, both countries. So on that note, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, our guest speakers. And I feel like everybody have a good night.